Hello and happy Monday. I am back to start our second week of Monday intention setting. And as I mentioned in the last intention setting video, I have been reading Love Warrior, and I'm almost done now with Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And I chose as kind of my inspiration for today when I sat down to think about what I wanted my personal intention to be this week, what I've been grappling with or working on in my personal life, to then kind of turn and use here as a launching point for us. And I went back to a page that I had dog-eared in Untamed. It's actually page 77. So if you're reading it or you're in the middle of it or own it, you can kind of reference what I'm going to be talking about. But I tend to dog-ear pages as I go, and then I go back and I highlight and I write notes once I've gotten my head around everything. But there's a lot of dog-eared pages in this book for me because there's a lot of moments when I was reading a passage or a page or a chapter and I would gasp or go, oh my God, yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling, or I understand that. You feel that too. So this was a dog-eared page of mine. I'm going to share this paragraph with you, and then we'll talk about our clear intention for the week and reflecting on that together. All right, so this is page 77 from Untamed. I am a human being, meant to be in perpetual becoming. If I am living bravely, my entire life will become a million deaths and rebirths. My goal is not to remain the same, but to live in such a way that each day, year, moment, relationship, conversation, and crisis is the material I use to become a truer, more beautiful version of myself. The goal is to surrender, constantly, to who I just was in order to become who this next moment calls me to be. I will not hold on to a single existing idea, opinion, identity, story, or relationship that keeps me from emerging new. I cannot hold too tightly to any riverbank. I must let go of the shore in order to travel deeper and see farther, again and again, and then again, until the final death and rebirth, right up until then. So after coming back to this paragraph for this week, I decided that my personal intention is going to be this idea of non-attachment, which you've heard me talk about a lot in class. In yoga teacher training, it was the single hardest idea for me to wrap my head around. Because if you work really hard for something and you invest yourself fully in something and you put your heart into it, you expect and desire a certain outcome. And when that outcome isn't yours for any number of reasons, maybe it never could have been yours, maybe there's circumstances that are all completely out of your control, or maybe at the end it just wasn't meant to be. But when that outcome isn't yours that you so desired and so were striving for, what happens then? How can anyone practice non-attachment when we are also supposed to be motivated individuals who seek things, who seek growth? It seemed like a foreign concept to me. But really, it's a healthy attachment to things that we have control over. Small, actionable steps of each moment, not large outcomes that will steal away our joy if they don't occur. So when we are in tune with who we are as people, and when we believe that we are complete within ourselves, not because we are complete when we have this updated kitchen, or we are complete when this relationship comes to fruition, or we are complete when we get that new car, right? If we are complete within ourselves at each and any given moment, without depending on another person or another circumstance, then we're practicing non-attachment. We are not saying, when I have this, I will be whole, or when I am 20 pounds thinner, then I like the version of me, and then I'm complete. Right? It's without judgment. It's in this moment right now. It's understanding, as Glennon writes, that we are this evolving being who is always forming. And are we willing to practice this idea of non-attachment to our former selves? The self of 10 seconds ago is our former self. So the thoughts that we've had in the last 10 seconds have somehow, in some tiny way, changed us. And I think what happens at times, and I know it happens for me, is that we become so held to this idea of who we are and who we identify as, right? So if I am going to be proud of the person I am and confident in the person that I am, you can fall into the trap of thinking that, okay, well, when I say I am someone or I demonstrate that I have this character trait, then I always have to have it or I'm a fraud. So sometimes we think, for better or worse, I am supportive, I am selfless, I am loving, I am nurturing. But what happens when we are being all of those things and they're not true to that situation anymore? What happens when being loving and nurturing and caring and strong for someone else is detrimental to ourselves? And that's when we cannot be held so tightly to the ideas of how do we identify with ourselves? Am I identifying with these character traits and characteristics because I feel like that's what people expect of me and they'll be let down? Is it a pride thing that they'll view me as a fraud? Is it an identity thing? If I'm not these things, then I don't know who I am. And how do we combat these obstacles? I think the first step is to be in the moment, to be true with your feelings, to be able to see past that filter of what should I do and change the lens to what do I need. So I think the second step is to be aware of your needs. And that's not easy because we have done such a good job training ourselves to see things a certain way, to believe that we only need certain things. We've done a really great job of taking on a role that, as we've changed as a person, might not be our truth anymore. Might not feel right, but it did fit and we committed to it, so we try to make it fit. I think the third step is to be willing and open to all of our change. So if we notice something in this being in the moment, in this awareness that feels uncomfortable, but that we think is true, it's being willing and open to explore it. Right? So the idea that this job isn't for me anymore is uncomfortable because there goes my security, right? There goes my sense of self, my identity. There goes the work friends that I have. There goes a huge change potentially in my life if I decide that this might not be for me. So sometimes we can shut it down, or sometimes we sit with it. Sometimes we sit with it and say, okay, what is it that I'm feeling? What do I notice about myself, how I breathe, how I carry myself, how I feel in my head and in my heart when I'm at this job? What is it that causes it? Be open to digging deeper as to what's causing these feelings that you notice. And then you have a choice to make a change or to offer up whatever holds you back. So maybe your change is a little edit to your story. Maybe it's setting a small boundary, right? It doesn't have to be this life-altering change. Maybe it's saying, you know what? For myself, I am now going to do this, or I'm going to practice saying no to that. To acknowledge that I am an evolving human being in, quote, perpetual becoming. If I offer up what's holding me back, it's the symbolic letting go, the symbolic surrender of, you know what? I'm going to start to practice letting go of the things that I cannot change, the things that hold me back. And I'm going to offer them up symbolically to acknowledge that I am not attached to them. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be that you feel better in this big relief after a day or 2 or 10 or a year of practicing non-attachment, of practicing offering up what holds you back. But when you visualize handing something over to whomever, to the universe, to a deity, to the ground beneath your feet, right? It doesn't have to be anyone in particular. But when you say, you know what, this is not for me anymore, I'm handing it over. I'm sitting with this discomfort, and now that I've sat with it and seen it and acknowledged it, I'm handing it over. And as part of our becoming, when we incorporate these things like being in the moment, being aware and willing and open, when we practice self-inquiry, that is when we practice not holding too tightly to any riverbank. That is when we can let go of the shore in order to travel deeper and see farther. It's impossible to do that when we are holding so tightly to an identity because it's comfortable. So for this week, my intention is to practice non-attachment, to do this self-inquiry, to surrender, and to live bravely. We'll check in on Friday to kind of touch home base again with this intention that we've set. Maybe there's more work that needs to be done with this. Maybe it's something that you want to delve a little deeper into, but we can journal about how we've approached this intention on Friday when we have that little meetup. I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon on the mat.